All right, earlier we told you about security issues in Jigawa State and the fact that some personnel were arrested as regards trafficking of arms. Right now we have a security expert, Salaudeen Hashim, joining us now for more on the impact of illegal arms smuggling on security challenges, of course, confronting the country. Salaudeen, thank you so much for joining us. Let me hear from you. Can you help us, understand what illegal arms smuggling entails, particularly in the Nigerian context?
All right. I think fundamentally our challenge and setback emanates from the fact that we have a very weak legal framework that is helping to control manufacture and, of course, help control the either illicit use, transfer, or manufacturing of arms. That is actually one of the fundamental gaps that we have. So the absence of a robust extant law in itself has actually given room for a number of variables. One is the fact that because of the challenges confronting the country from the Sahel and then, of course, from the Gulf of Guinea, we have a very fundamental situation at hand, and that is because in the Sahel you have close to about 14 or 15 terrorist organizations who are also operating in that particular sphere, from the Islamic Maghreb, Al-Shabaab. You have the various layers of terrorist organization, ISWAP and all of that, and of course the activities of pirates in the south also is a contributory factor. So going straight into the conversation. One is the fact that we do not have an extant law. Two is the fact that we have over 10 million small arms and light weapons in this country. 80% of that number is in the hands of non-state actors, which also possesses a number of capability to be able to threaten state actors. And of course, again, is the issue that borders around illicit manufacturing of small arms. And then, of course, we have the socioeconomic component that also help to facilitate the trade market. And then, of course, knowing fully well that because of the economic setback of most of our personnel, that these guys also use them as vendors to be able to courier arms from one point to the other. And of course, just a few days ago, about last week, we saw protesting retired police officers. And you recall one of the issues we had also raised as a keg of gunpowder is that they may become tools in the hands of criminal elements. So if you have people who were previous personnel who were not happy with the system, obviously they become a tool waiting to be used and, of course, being weaponized by criminal entities. And I think it is very important to put it from that point. Third issue is actually the weak border control management. Our borders don't have adequate control, manning, and of course we have over 1,450 square kilometers of unmanned borders. And this in itself suggests a very vast entry point for small arms. And this also, going into the elections, is also one of the big flag points that we also need to look at as why are people beginning to bring in arms at this point. So election in itself, again, is one of the contributory factors that also contribute to this very large scale of arms challenges and cartel that we have. But most fundamentally is that we need a little bit of a global protocol that will help us to locally align the Nigerian context into what happens at the global level in the terms of managing control and, of course, mitigating the risk of arms. But again, data is very key. Helping to mitigate this issue require that we have a control around stockpiling, stock management, and how you can also control it. But in itself is the fact that state actors must also support by helping to keep a good database of what they have in the armory so that we know where these arms are going to, where they are coming from, and it helps us to be able to trace it back just in case a particular arm is being used in a very destination, knowing where the origin of that arm is coming from.
Now, Salaudeen, how significant is the problem of illegal arms smuggling in Nigeria today, especially when you look at, tackling insecurity in Africa?
The biggest contributory factor to the conflict we have in this country now, both in Nigeria and of course across the continent, is actually the inability to control small and illicit weapons. This particular issue has continued to threaten the fabrics of insecurity, and again the question around whether or not government needs to pay a lot of attention to this has become very prominent. And again, for me, is about how these arms are also being trafficked, and of course the activities of artisanal manufacturers, and again how we also confront personnel who also become very complicit or who have gone rogue in terms of also selling stockpiles to most of these guys. So the accountability infrastructure in terms of handling, destroying, stockpile management is also something that also needs a little bit of an additional attempt by the state. We have seen very clearly in recent time how most personnel have either killed, in Kafanchan for instance, how a personnel killed his colleague and sold this arm to bandits. And then, of course, this is just one example out of many. So this in itself has become a big ring, and of course, a huge cartel that is being run by men of the underworld just to be able to continue to advance their terror reign. But again, government and security agencies must put in a lot of trackers to trace every weapon that is either in the armory or in the stockpile, and then of course put some kind of fingerprints on them. If we don't have fingerprints on most of these arms, it becomes very difficult. And of course, importation and how illegal movement and what happens to artisanal manufacturers, I think a lot needs to be done in terms of putting additional effort in containing, controlling, preventing, and deterring the threats that all of this brings into our security landscape.
Now, Salaudeen, where do you think these illegal arms are coming from, and how do you think they get into our country? I know you talked about our porous borders, but then again, we have the customs. Are they not doing enough to tackle this issue?
Yeah, there's an illegal armed route that came all the way from Central African Republic. So if you trace it from here to Central African Republic and of course to Libya, the fall of Libya actually is one of the biggest threats to what we currently confront in this country today. Because again, the nearest and the immediate destination where economy of criminality becomes very attractive then becomes Nigeria. So we have seen how this route and consistent studies have showed that this movement and this route from Libya to Central African Republic and of course to Nigeria has become one of the key elements. The second aspect is the Sahel, the activities in the Sahel all the way from Mauritania to Central African Republic. This activity in the north is putting a lot of pressure to this fabric, and of course that also is translating into illegal movement. Yes, we have customs, but again we have challenges with personnel. Like I said, we have over 1,400 square kilometers of unmanned border. So there are illegal entries into this country, and this route are usually the safe haven for people who are trafficking arms into this country. And largely, this has become one of the biggest industry lately for those who are in that particular corridor. And of course, from the south, we also saw the activities of pirates that are also putting pressure from. So Nigeria is actually sandwiched between two axes of evil, the Sahel and the Gulf of Guinea. These two elements are illegal routes that has consistently allowed weapons into the country unchecked, unmanned. But again, we need technology to be able to help customs and other agencies to track and, of course, monitor appropriately. Until that is done, we may not be able to control this because customs does not have the capability currently in terms of personnel to be able to control this menace that is confronting us.
I'd like you to reiterate. Tell me, to what extent has arms smuggling contributed to the ongoing insurgency in the northeast and even banditry in the northwest?
Yeah, I mean, to be very honest, the contribution of small arms in the Northeast and the Northwest has become largely very huge. And I use that word very carefully because, again, there are a number of factors. One is the fact that we have the activities of Civilian Joint Task Force, the vigilante groups of Nigeria, the Hunters Association, and then, of course, now in the Northwest, we'll have the hybrid group now, which makes a group or a combination of both hunters and former bandits and those who have repented coming together to fight this menace. So these activities are ongoing. And then, of course, yes, it is done under close supervision of the security forces. But again, you cannot take away the fact that some other of these guys might go rogue at times, and how all of these things contribute to these weapons. And of course, again, is the fact that it has become like a safeguard infantry around those who believe that yes, they are not state actors, but because they control some enormous respect in their local communities, that they also find alternative markets where they can also get this arm to be able to respond to this. So the needs are also there, the market is there, and that in itself seemingly to be thriving. But again, in issuing arms to most of these non-state apparatus by the state, I don't know what guidelines and checklists they have, but again, knowing the kind of effort that has gone into weapons and ammunition management lately in this region, I think there is not enough that has been done. One is the fact that during any form of amnesty or mass surrendering of terrorist organizations, Boko Haram, the bandits, and of course, some of these arms are again reissued. And again, there is this argument that these arms should go to the national stockpiles and a pool where they can be used for purposes of national security. Again, the question is that what is the accountability, either in the use or in the misuse, or again, how this arms also go through the back channels and get back into the forest. So there are quite a number of arguments around this. And I think, again, one of the things we have done lately is to develop a standard operating procedure. This operating procedure offers a very clear pathway that allows the state and, of course, security agencies to have appropriate documentation of how to manage this. And I think this is where the Center for Control and Small Arms truly comes in terms of ensuring that they have what they call a procedure that allows for every form of arms in that region to be thoroughly documented, and then, of course, allows them to trace and track just in case of any finds in any community. But yes, the center is actually responding gradually. But I think a whole lot needs to be done, considering the enormous amount of arms in the hands of locals in these two regions, and of course, particularly in the hands of non-state armed groups. But again, our borders need to be managed and to be controlled.
Thank you so much, Salaudeen Hashim, for having this conversation with us, and we hope you join us again some other time.
Thank you very much for having me.